The casket gleamed under the sterile fluorescent lights of the funeral home chapel, a polished mahogany beast that swallowed the room whole. But Samuel couldn't stop staring at the bouquet he'd arranged himself. 12 perfect white roses, thorns stripped away like the secrets they'd buried together. "He's gone," whispered the officiant, a distant cousin with a voice like cracking ice. David Ellis Harper, beloved son, brother, architect of dreams. Samuel's hands trembled as he adjusted a petal, his knuckles white against the stem, because if he let go, the whole damn lie would unravel right there on the altar. 12 years. 12 years of stolen kisses in shadowed alleys of Brooklyn, of forged alibis and midnight vows exchanged under the Brooklyn Bridge. And now this, a room full of strangers who thought he was just the florist, the quiet guy with the van and the vague smile. It started on a sweltering July afternoon in 2013, the kind of heat that turned Manhattan into a pressure cooker, where even the pigeons looked like they were plotting a coup. Samuel Rivera, 28 and fresh off a bad breakup that left him questioning if love was just another word for handcuffs, had wandered into Ellis & Sons Florist on a whim, seeking solace in the cool blast of the shop's AC and the earthy scent of damp soil. He was a graphic designer by trade, scraping by on freelance gigs that paid in ramen and regret. But that day he needed something green, something alive to remind him the world hadn't wilted entirely. David Harper was behind the counter, 32, with that effortless charm that made you forget your own name, tall, broad-shouldered, with hazel eyes that crinkled like autumn leaves and a laugh that rumbled low, like thunder over the Hudson. "You look like a man who's allergic to happiness," David said, not looking up from trimming a bundle of peonies. His sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms dusted with pollen and faint scars from thorns that never quite healed right. Samuel froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips, the steam curling up like a question mark. "What makes you say that?" he shot back, sharper than he intended. But David just grinned. "That slow, knowing curve that hooked you before you knew you were caught. The way you're eyeing those lilies like they're about to bite. Lilies are for funerals, man. You need something with fight sunflowers." They turned toward the light. No matter what, Samuel bought the sunflowers, and with them, a conversation that stretched from the shop's worn wooden counter to the stoop outside, where they sat until the sun dipped low and painted the fire escapes in gold. David talked about his family, old money Harpers from Connecticut, summers in the Hamptons, a father who built skyscrapers and expected his only son to follow suit. "But flowers," David shrugged, flicking a petal into the gutter. "They're honest. They bloom and die on their own terms. Architecture's all blueprints and bullshit compromises." Samuel, who'd grown up in a cramped Queens apartment with a single mom who worked doubles at the hospital, found himself spilling about the ex who'd called him too sensitive one too many times, about designs that never sold because they were too queer for the straight-laced agencies. By the time the streetlights flickered on, David's hand had brushed Samuel's knee, accidental at first, then deliberate, and when their fingers laced together, it felt like the first real breath Samuel had taken in months. They kissed there on the stoop, tentative and tasting of coffee and possibility, the city humming around them like it approved. "Come back tomorrow," David murmured against his lips. "I'll show you the greenhouse out back. It's got secrets even the rats don't know." That greenhouse became their sanctuary, a glass-walled haven tucked behind the shop, overgrown with ivy and orchids that David coaxed back from the brink. It was there, amid the humid tangle of leaves, that they first made love, slow, exploratory, with David's calloused hands mapping Samuel's skin like he was designing a masterpiece. "You're beautiful," David whispered, his voice breaking on the word, as if saying it aloud made it too real, too fragile. Samuel laughed, pulling him closer, because in that moment, with the rain pattering on the roof like applause, he believed it. But secrets have a way of seeding themselves early. David's family was the anchor dragging them under from the start. Elias Harper, the patriarch, was a towering figure in New York's construction world, a man whose handshake could seal deals worth millions but whose Bible-thumping Sundays at the family estate left no room for deviations. "Dad's old school," David explained one night, as they lay tangled in Samuel's thrift store sheets, the sheets smelling of takeout lo mein and sweat. "He'd sooner disown me than see me with." "Well, you know," Samuel nodded, tracing the line of David's jaw, but the words lodged like thorns. They agreed to keep it quiet at first, just until David could come out on his own terms. Work drinks became alibis, family dinners excuses, and their love a hidden garden, blooming in stolen hours. Years blurred into a rhythm of quiet defiance. Samuel's freelance gigs steadied into a small studio in Williamsburg, where he designed album covers for indie bands and logos for queer-owned cafes, each one a subtle rebellion. David expanded the Florist shop into a chain of 3, his arrangements gracing weddings and galas, though he always saved the rarest blooms for Samuel. A single blue hydrangea slipped into his messenger bag, or a note tucked into a vase. "Thinking of you in the thorns." They built a life in the shadows. A sublet apartment in Bushwick with exposed brick and a fire escape strung with fairy lights. Lazy Sundays at Coney Island where they'd hold hands only when the boardwalk thinned out. Whispered promises of someday over bottles of cheap Merlot. Someday came in fragments. In 2017, they exchanged rings in a clandestine ceremony at City Hall, officiated by a drag queen friend of Samuel's who called them "my favorite disaster duo." The rings were simple tungsten bands, engraved with coordinates of that first stoop: 40.7589 degrees north, 73.9851 degrees west. "Husband," David said that night, the word tasting foreign and sweet on his tongue, as they danced barefoot in their kitchen to Nina Simone. Samuel cherished it, that word, like a pressed flower in a book, proof that love could thrive without sunlight. But the shadows lengthened. David's health started slipping in subtle ways. A cough that lingered through flu season, fatigue that chalked up to long hours. "It's nothing," he'd insist, waving off Samuel's worries with a bouquet of chamomile to soothe the soul. Samuel believed him because love makes fools of us all, and because losing David wasn't an option, not after 12 years of building this fragile empire of 2. The call came on a Tuesday in October 2025, the kind of crisp fall day where the leaves in Prospect Park burned orange like warnings. Samuel was sketching at his desk when his phone buzzed. Unknown number, Connecticut area code. "Mr. Rivera, this is Dr. Ellis from Mount Sinai. Your friend, David Harper, collapsed at work. We're prepping for surgery. You should come now, friend." The word hit like a slap, but Samuel was already grabbing his keys, the world narrowing to the thrum of traffic as he raced across the bridge. At the hospital, the sterile halls smelled of bleach and despair, and David's family was there: Elias, stone-faced in a cashmere coat; his sister Clara, dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief; cousins and aunts murmuring in the waiting room like a Greek chorus. They nodded politely at Samuel when he arrived, the florist friend who'd delivered sympathy lilies on past birthdays. "He's stable," Elias grunted, clapping Samuel on the shoulder a beat too hard. "Cancer. Pancreatic. Advanced." Docs give him weeks. Maybe. Samuel's knees buckled, but he caught himself on a chair, the room spinning like a bad render on his screen. Weeks. He demanded to see him, and they let him because who argues with the guy who brings the flowers? David was pale against the pillows, tubes snaking like vines, but his eyes lit up when Samuel entered, that crinkle returning like a miracle. "Hey, Sunflower," he rasped, reaching for his hand. Samuel gripped it, rings clinking softly, and bent to kiss his knuckles, ignoring the nurse's raised eyebrow. In the days that followed, the hospital became their confessional. David confessed the pain he'd hidden, the late-night Google searches, the specialists who'd shaken their heads. "I didn't want to drag you down," he admitted, voice cracking. Samuel raged, then sobbed, then held him through the morphine haze, reading aloud from their old emails, the ones laced with inside jokes and X-rated promises. "We had 12 years, Samuel whispered one night, as David's breathing evened out. "That's more than most get in a lifetime." The funeral planning fell to Samuel in secret, because David's family handled the official parts, the obituary in the Times, the Episcopal service, the wake at the Harvard Club. Samuel arranged the flowers. Of course, white roses for purity, lilies for the soul's return, a cascade of David's favorite sunflowers framing the casket like a defiant halo. He stood in the back during the viewings, anonymous in his gray suit, heart splintering as Clara eulogized her devoted brother. Always the rock. Devoted. If only they knew. Now, on this gray November afternoon, the chapel swelled with mourners, colleagues in power ties, old fraternity brothers clapping backs, a sea of faces that had never glimpsed the man Samuel loved. The officiant droned on, and Samuel lingered by the arrangement table, fiddling with ribbons, his throat tight as a noose. That's when Elias approached, his shadow falling heavy. "Fine work, son," he said, voice gravelly with grief. David always had an eye for beauty. Shame he never settled down proper. Samuel's vision blurred, the roses swimming like accusations. Settled down. He opened his mouth to correct him, to spill it all, the vows, the rings, the life they'd carved from scraps. But the words died as Clara joined them, her arm looping through her father's. "Thank you for being here, Samuel." It meant the world to him. I know, it meant the world. And that was the hook that pulled him under, the lie so polished it shone. The procession snaked through the rain-slicked streets of the Upper East Side, tail lights blurring into crimson streaks under the relentless downpour, as if the sky itself wept for the man it had claimed too soon. Samuel rode alone in the florist's van, trailing the limousines like a ghost ship, his wipers slapping rhythmically against the grief smeared on the windshield. He'd insisted on driving himself, couldn't bear the confines of a car with the Harpers, their condolences laced with pity for a friendship they'd never understood. 12 years, and here he was, reduced to the delivery boy at his own husband's send-off. Flashback to the greenhouse, 5 years in, when the cracks first spiderwebbed through their bliss. It was 2018, Pride Month bleeding into summer, and the city pulsed with rainbows and rebellion. Samuel had pushed for it, just once, let's go public, hand in hand down Fifth Avenue, fuck the fallout. David had frozen, shears mid-snip on a rosebush, the metallic tang of sap thick in the air. "Babe, you know why," he'd said, eyes on the floor. "Dad's board seat at the church, the firm he's retiring soon. One whiff of this, and it's all dust." Samuel had stormed out, heartsick, wandering the village until dawn. But by morning, David was at his door with a peace offering, a bouquet of forget-me-nots and a promise ring, thicker than the tungsten, etched with forever in the roots. They compromised, as lovers do, half measures that tasted like ash. David came out to his sister Clara over Easter brunch in Connecticut, the one who'd always been the soft edge of the family blade. She hugged him, teary-eyed, whispered, "I'm proud, Davy," and kept their secret like a locket against her chest. But Elias? He remained the monolith, his Sunday sermons on family values hitting like shrapnel whenever David visited home. Samuel tagged along as the business associate, enduring small talk about market trends while David's foot nudged his under the mahogany table, a Morse code of "I love you." Their life deepened in the hush. Samuel's studio flourished. He landed a contract with a queer film collective, designing posters that screamed authenticity, bold colors, intertwined bodies that echoed his own hidden nights. David proposed expansions, a flower truck for farmers markets, pop-up arrangements at queer weddings in the park. They'd celebrate closeted victories with rooftop picnics, David's head in Samuel's lap as they watched ferries slice the East River. When Dad's gone, David would murmur, stars pricking the skyline, "We'll have the big wedding." Vows in Spanish, "Your mom's tamales," the works. Samuel's mother, Rosa, had known from the start. She'd met David at a family barbecue in Queens, watching them chop onions with synchronized ease, and pulled Samuel aside after, "Mijo, that man's eyes light up like Christmas when you laugh. Hold on tight." She was their quiet ally, slipping David's favorites into care packages, calling him Yerno in teasing Spanglish when Samuel wasn't listening. But even she urged caution. The Harpers are icebergs, Sammy. One wrong thaw, and they sink you. The betrayal slithered in unannounced, a serpent in the garden. It was 2022, David's 40th looming like a milestone, when Elias dropped the bomb over a tense dinner at the estate. Golden retrievers dozing by the fire, crystal glasses clinking like judgments. "I've been talking to Margaret's boy, Thomas," Elias announced, fork pausing over his steak. "Fine young architect, David's age. Single. Church-going. You two should meet." David choked on his wine, face paling, while Samuel, seated across as the innocuous colleague, felt his fork bend in his grip. The room went still, Clara's eyes darting like minnows, but Elias plowed on, oblivious or willful. "Time you settled, son. Legacy and all that." David mumbled excuses, fled to the veranda for air, and Samuel followed under pretense of fetching coats. In the chill night, under a canopy of ancient oaks, David shattered. "He knows," he gasped, pacing the flagstones. "Or suspects. This is his way of fixing me." Samuel pulled him close, rain starting to mist their faces, and they kissed fierce and furious, a fuck you to the house lights glowing behind them. But the seed was planted, doubt, that most American of poisons, the fear that love wasn't enough against blood and legacy. From there, the conflicts compounded like interest on a bad loan. David's work hours stretched. Meetings with Thomas that were anything but, though nothing ever happened, David swore it, and Samuel believed, because trust was the glue holding their mosaic together. But paranoia gnawed. Late texts from unknown numbers. David's phone flipped face down more often. Samuel threw himself into work, channeling the ache into designs that won awards, a campaign for a trans rights org, all fractured mirrors reflecting unbreakable spirits. Critics called it raw, revolutionary, but Samuel knew the truth. It was therapy on canvas. Then came the diagnosis, slipping in like a thief in the chemo ward. David had ignored the twinges, the yellowing eyes, chalking it up to stress. But one routine checkup at Sloan Kettering turned into a whirlwind of scans and second opinions. Stage 4, the oncologist said flatly, in a room that smelled of stale coffee and false hope. Samuel was there, holding David's hand under the table, rings biting into palms. Prognosis, months, with aggressive treatment. David laughed, bitter and broken. Guess the old man gets his legacy after all. No grandkids from the queer son. The treatment was a gauntlet. Infusions that left David a ghost of himself, hair falling like autumn leaves in the shower drain. Samuel combing it gently each night with fingers that shook. They moved to a one-bedroom near the hospital, subletting the Bushwick Haven, because stairs were enemies now. Samuel became nurse, cook, cheerleader, blending green smoothies, binging old sitcoms, tracing constellations on David's thinning back. Remember our first pride? David would rasp during the good hours, when the drugs ebbed. You in that rainbow tank. Me pretending I was straight as the parade route. Samuel would nod, throat tight, and they'd reminisce until sleep claimed David, leaving Samuel to stare at the ceiling, bargaining with gods he didn't believe in. Clara visited sporadically, bringing gourmet soups and furtive apologies. I should have fought Dad harder, but Elias? He loomed at a distance, wiring checks for bills with notes that read, "For my boy," like property claims. Once, during a rare homecoming, he cornered Samuel in the kitchen while David napped. "You're a good friend," Elias said, eyes hard as flint. "But he's family business now." Samuel bit his tongue bloody, because rage wouldn't bring David back, only isolation. As winter gripped the city in 2025, David's decline accelerated. Bones protruding like branches in a barren tree, breaths shallow as whispers. They spent Valentine's in the hospice wing, Samuel reading poetry from a dog-eared Neruda. I love you as certain dark things are to be loved, in secret, between the shadow and the soul. David squeezed his hand, tears carving paths down sunken cheeks. Promise me, he murmured, at the end. Don't let them erase us. Samuel promised, sealing it with a kiss that tasted of salt and forever. The end came swift, a mercy in the pre-dawn hush of November 10th. Monitors flatlined, nurses swarmed, and Samuel was ushered out, collapsing in the hall as Clara arrived, her scream echoing like judgment. He's gone, she sobbed, and Samuel echoed it silently, the world fracturing into shards. Now, as the cortege halted at Greenwood Cemetery, the rain a relentless curtain, Samuel parked the van and stepped out, bouquet in hand, 12 white roses, one for each year. The mourners clustered under black tents, umbrellas blooming like funeral flowers, and Samuel wove through, head down, until he reached the gravesite. Elias stood at the head, Bible in hand, intoning psalms about eternal rest. Clara spotted Samuel, waved him forward with a watery smile. Join us, she called softly. He did, placing the bouquet on the lowered casket, fingers lingering on the wood as if he could will David back through sheer will. That's when it happened. The slip of paper fluttered from the roses, a note Samuel had tucked in secret. My husband, my light. Until the stars fall, caught on the wind, dancing briefly before Clara snatched it, her brow furrowing as she read. The air thickened, rain pattering like accusations. Clara's gasp sliced through the downpour like a siren's wail, her fingers crumpling the note as eyes, dozens of them, swiveled toward Samuel, the florist unmasked in the mud-slicked grass of Greenwood. "What the hell is this?" Elias thundered, snatching the paper from her, his face purpling under the brim of his fedora, veins bulging like roots unearthed. Samuel stood frozen, water streaming down his collar, the casket yawning open below like a grave accusation, because in that heartbeat, 12 years of silence shattered, and the truth bloomed ugly and inevitable. The mourners murmured, a tide of whispers swelling. "Husband? David? That guy? The flower dude?" As aunts clutched pearls and cousins pulled out phones, the digital vultures already circling. Samuel met Elias's glare, chin lifting in the deluge. "'Cause fuck it, David was gone. But their love, that fire wouldn't gutter out in this storm." "It's what it says," he replied, voice steady as the bridge they'd vowed under, though his heart hammered like a trapped bird. "We were married. 12 years. City Hall, 2017. He was my husband." Elias recoiled as if slapped, the note fluttering to the sodden earth, ink bleeding into confession. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide with a mix of shock and dawning sorrow. "Davy, you never." While the officiant cleared his throat awkwardly, umbrella tilting like a guillotine. The rain intensified, drumming on tents, drowning the psalms in chaos, and Samuel felt the weight of it all. The betrayal not just of secrets kept, but of a family that had blinded itself to the man David truly was. Betrayal. It hadn't been Elias's maneuvering with Thomas that cut deepest. No, that was a clumsy hammer blow. The real knife twisted in 2020, pandemic shadows lengthening across the city, when isolation turned their hidden world claustrophobic. Locks clicked like judgments, masks muffled kisses, and David, ever the provider, insisted Samuel quarantine at the Bushwick apartment while he manned the shop. "Essential work, babe. Flowers for the front lines." Samuel protested, but relented, their connection reduced to video calls where David's smile flickered like bad Wi-Fi, hazel eyes shadowed by exhaustion. That's when the emails started surfacing, innocuous at first, forwarded from David's work account, junk mail about discreet retreats for executive stress relief. Samuel dismissed them, chalking it up to spam, until one night, scrolling idly while David slept off a double shift, he clicked a link, a glossy site for a Connecticut wellness center, testimonials glowing about reparative journeys and restoring God's design. His stomach plummeted. Buried in the footer, a donor list, Elias Harper prominent among the names. Confrontation came at dawn, coffee brewing bitter as bile, David bleary-eyed and defensive. "It's Dad's donation, not mine," he insisted, raking hands through sleep-tousled hair. "He sends me the newsletters as reminders. I delete them," but Samuel pressed, voice cracking. "And you never thought to tell me? That he's funding this hate while we hide like criminals?" David deflated, sinking to the kitchen floor, pulling Samuel down with him. "I didn't want to burden you. He's my father, Sam." "Blood's a bitch," they cried then, tangled on linoleum, vowing transparency, no more half-truths. But the scar lingered, a reminder that love's garden grew weeds too. The pandemic forged them closer in other ways, a phoenix from isolation's ashes. With shops shuttered, David pivoted to deliveries, bouquets for essential workers, care packages for the grieving, and Samuel designed the branding, vibrant and hopeful amid the gray. They cooked elaborate meals from pantry staples, danced in the living room to Motown vinyls scratched from thrift store bins, made love with a desperation that bordered on sacrament. "We're survivors," David whispered one night, tracing Samuel's spine by candlelight, power outages plunging the block into primal dark. "This city chews you up, but we rebuild." Rebuilding hit a crescendo in 2023. David's health scare a false alarm, gallstones, not cancer. Thank God, but it cracked the facade wider. Elias, hearing of the ER visit via Clara, descended on the city like a hawk, insisting David recuperate at the estate. "Family takes care of family," he boomed, eyeing Samuel's apartment like it was a slum. David went, reluctantly, their calls clipped by Elias's hovering. It was there, in the Hamptons manse with its ocean views and oppressive silence, that David penned the letter, hidden in a vase shipped back to Samuel, petals concealing the words, "I told him about us. He didn't disown me, but he prayed over me like I was possessed. I love you more for this fight." Samuel burned the letter in the sink that night, ashes swirling like dark confetti, because progress was Pyrrhic. Elias's acceptance was a cold truce, no outright rejection, but no embrace either. Holiday cards arrived addressed to David and friend, invitations phrased to exclude. Clara bridged the gap, sneaking Samuel into brunches disguised as catering consults, her whispers of "he's coming around" a lifeline. But the undercurrent of betrayal festered, Elias's prayers evolving into subtle sabotages, introductions to suitable colleagues, questions about future plans, laced with implication. Back at the grave, the storm broke fully, mourners scattering to limos as Elias rounded on Samuel, face a mask of fury and grief. "Married? Without telling us? He was my son." Biddle flew, mixing with rain, and Samuel stepped forward, close enough to smell the old man's bourbon-laced cologne. "He was my everything. And you? You made him choose between blood and heart every damn day." The words hung, electric, as Clara tugged Elias back, her voice a plea. "Dad, not here. Not now." But now was all they had. The burial proceeded in fractured haste, dirt pattering on the casket like final applause, Samuel's roses crushed underfoot. Mahogany panels and crystal decanters, a stark contrast to the street's grit. The tension simmered. Mourners clustered in tweed and pearls, toasting David's legacy in stone and steel, oblivious to the undercurrent. Samuel nursed a scotch in the corner, ring heavy on his finger, when Clara approached, note smoothed in her palm. "Why hide it?" she asked softly, eyes searching his like David's had. "We could've. I could've been there." Samuel swallowed, the burn of liquor no match for the ache. "He was protecting you. All of you." Tears welling, and pulled him into a hug that smelled of Chanel and regret, the first crack in the family's ice. As night fell, the city reclaiming its neon pulse, Samuel slipped out to the balcony overlooking Madison Avenue, the hum of taxis a distant lullaby. 2 glasses in hand, offering one with a grunt. "To David," he toasted, voice gruff. Samuel clinked, wary, but the old man surprised him. "I failed him. Pushed too hard. Saw what I wanted." A pause. Rain whispering on awnings below. "That note is beautiful." He chose well. It wasn't absolution, but it was a root taking hold. Samuel nodded, throat tight. "He loved you, too. Always did." Elias turned away, shoulders shaking, And for the first time, Samuel saw the man, not the monolith, frail, human, grieving a son he'd half known. The weeks blurred into a numb haze, Samuel adrift in the Bushwick apartment, David's scent fading from the pillows like a ghost sigh. He packed boxes methodically, photo albums of hidden vacations, a weekend in Provincetown, disguised as Guy's Trip, ticket stubs from off-Broadway shows, the tungsten ring now on a chain around his neck. Work piled up, designs turning abstract and anguished, but Clara called daily, her voice a tether, "Come for Thanksgiving." Dad's asking. Thanksgiving at the estate was a minefield of mince pies and minefields, but Elias greeted him at the door with a handshake that lingered. "Glad you're here, son, son." The word landed soft, and Samuel blinked back heat, stepping into a dining room strung with lights, Clara's kids giggling over turkey. It wasn't erasure, but integration, slow as seasons. Yet the climax brewed in December, a letter arriving crisp in Samuel's mailbox, Elias's stationery, summoning him to the lawyer's office. David's will, Clara explained over the phone, tone laced with unease. There's complications. The office on Park Avenue gleamed with mahogany and money, the attorney a bespectacled shark in pinstripes. Mr. Harper's estate. He began, folders fanning like cards. Includes the brownstone, shares in Harper Construction, and a codicil. Samuel's pulse thrummed as the man slid a document across. David's script, witnessed and notarized. To Samuel Rivera, my legal spouse under New York common law. Wait, no, the City Hall marriage was private. But, the attorney faltered, flipping pages. It's contested. Mr. Elias Harper challenges the validity, claims undue influence, betrayal. Round 2, Elias's grief twisted into guardianship. Unwilling to let the florist claim what was family. Samuel's vision tunneled, David's voice echoing, "Don't let them erase us." "Challenge accepted," he said, voice steel, rising to leave. But Clara waited in the hall, eyes fierce. "I'm on your side, Sam." All the way, the legal storm gathered, depositions and discovery dredging up their hidden life, emails, photos, Rose's affidavit swearing to the union. Elias stonewalled, his lawyers painting Samuel as opportunist. But cracks showed. Clara's testimony, tearful and true, of David's confessions, the drag queen officiant, flamboyant in court with vows verbatim. Samuel endured, nights blurring into research and rage, until the eve of trial, when Elias called. "Come to the house," the old man rasped, voice stripped bare. Samuel went, tires crunching gravel under a moonless sky, the estate looming like a judge. Elias waited in the study, fire crackling, a decanter between them. "I read the emails," he admitted, no preamble. "The ones from his phone. All of it, your letters, the plans. He loved you like I couldn't teach him to love himself." A beat. Then, "I'm dropping the contest. The brownstone's yours." His. Samuel exhaled, world tilting. "Why now?" Elias shrugged, ancient in the firelight. "Because blood don't mean shit if it's poisoned." David's ghost. He'd want peace. Peace came fragile, like first frost. The new year dawned with Samuel in the brownstone, David's old haunt. Now there's in memory, unpacking boxes under Clara's watchful eye. She brought pie, stories, a photo album she'd curated. David as boy, as architect, as husband. He was proud, she said, hugging Samuel tight. Of you both. Spring unfurled tentative. Sunflowers pushing through Brooklyn soil. And Samuel planted a garden in the backyard. Thorns and all. Elias visited once. Awkward with trowel in hand. But they talked, really talked, of legacies rewritten. Of love's quiet revolutions. It wasn't fairy tale. But human, flawed. Forgiving. Alive. The courtroom on Center Street hummed with the low buzz of fluorescent fate. Wooden benches scarred by decades of despair. As Samuel sat ramrod straight in the gallery, David's ring chain glinting under his shirt like a talisman against the tide. It was March 2026. Winter's bones still rattling the windows. And the judge, a stern woman with silver streaks and eyes like unyielding slate, banged her gavel, calling the Harper v. Rivera estate case to order. Elias, across the aisle in a suit that hung looser than before, avoided Samuel's gaze, his empire of steel and stone reduced to this, a battle over a man's heart, laid bare in legalese. Your Honor, the Harper attorney intoned, voice oily as oil slicks on the East River. The decedent's union was a sham, unregistered, undocumented, a flight of fancy unworthy of the Harper legacy. Exhibits flashed on screens. Bank statements showing separate accounts. David's will silent on spouse. Elias's affidavit decrying manipulation by an outsider. Samuel's lawyer. A firebrand dyke named Lena with tattoos peeking from cuffs. Rose like avenging fury. Sham? Try sanctuary. We've got witnesses, correspondence, a decade plus of partnership forged in love. Not ledgers, testimony unspooled like a reel of their secret cinema. Rosa first, her accent thick with Queen's grit, dabbing eyes with a tissue as she recounted barbecues and hospital vigils. My boy Samuel, he cared for David like a husband should through sickness, through everything. Then the drag queen, Marla, in sequins that clashed gloriously with the oak panels. I married him myself, honey. Vows hotter than Hades, rings and all. Clara's turn gutted the room, her poise cracking as she read from David's journal. Unearthed from the brownstone attic, Samuel's my North Star. If Dad can't see that, it's his blindness, not our sin. Elias's cross was brutal, his lawyer probing Clara like a wound. You knew and said nothing? Complicit in deception. She held firm, voice ablade. Deception? Try survival. David hid to spare you heartbreak. Dad. The old man flinched, visible even from Samuel's perch. And when his turn came, Elias took the stand heavy-footed, swearing to uphold family sanctity. But under Lena's barrage, did you ever ask David what he wanted, or dictate it? He crumbled, voice breaking. I thought I was saving him. From hellfire. From himself. The recess was a mercy, Samuel fleeing to the hall for air that tasted of justice deferred. Clara found him by the vending machine, pressing a coffee into his hands. He's breaking, she murmured. Last night, he burned his old sermons. Said it was time to let God sort the sinners. Samuel nodded, numb, because victory tasted hollow without David to share it. The judge ruled at dusk, her voice echoing in the emptying chamber. Common law marriage affirmed under New York statute, given cohabitation, intent, and repute among intimates. Estate to Mr. Rivera, with provisions for family access. Gavel fell like grace, and Samuel sagged, tears hot on cheeks, as Clara enveloped him in a hug that bridged chasms. Elias approached slow, hand extended, not for shake, but clasp, rough palm to palm. You win, he said, eyes wet. He'd be proud, proud. The word echoed as Samuel claimed the brownstone keys that week, the lock turning smooth under fingers that knew every creak. David's space breathed him still. Blueprints yellowing on walls, a half-finished model of a queer youth center he'd sketched in remission's glow. Samuel wandered rooms like a pilgrim, unpacking their life, the wedding photo from Marla's disposable camera, blurry but beaming, mixtapes labeled for rainy fucks in David's scrawl. Nights were hardest, bed vast and echoing, but he slept clutching the chain, dreaming of greenhouse rains. Spring's thaw brought tentative blooms. Samuel reopened the Florist shop under a new banner, Harper Rivera Blooms, dedicating it to love without borders. Customers trickled in. Locals mourning the old owner. Whispers of the tragic romance drawing curious queers from the village. Clara co-signed the lease, her wedding planning business a natural fit. And together they arranged bouquets that told stories, rainbow ribbons for prides past, white lilies laced with sunflowers for second chances. Elias's redemption arc stuttered forward, awkward as a man learning dance. He showed at the shop's grand reopening, arms laden with crates from Connecticut greenhouses. Thought you could use these, he mumbled, unloading heirloom seeds like peace offerings. Samuel accepted, wary, and they worked side by side that afternoon, dirt under nails, silence companionable. David hated weeding, Elias ventured, tugging a dandelion. Said it was like pulling regrets. Samuel chuckled, the sound foreign and freeing. He preferred the pretty parts. But regrets? We had our share. Conversation flowed haltingly then, Elias admitting to therapy, a progressive pastor who'd cracked his Bible open to Leviticus's mercy clauses. Samuel sharing designs for the youth center, David's blueprints as blueprint. Build it, Elias said, clapping mud from hands. For him. I'll fund the steel. It was the first bridge, iron strong. But romance's embers stirred unexpected. Summer scorched in, pride banners flapping like flags of truce, and Samuel found himself at a block party in Bushwick, bass thumping from speakers, bodies swaying in liberated sweat. There, amid the glitter and grind, was Theo, 35, a sculptor with ink-stained hands and a smile that crinkled like David's but softer, less haunted. They met over spilled sangria, Theo's laugh pulling Samuel from his shell. You look like you design dreams for a living. Flirtation sparked. Tentative coffee dates in hidden cafes. Walks along the waterfront where hands brushed accidental. Guilt gnawed. A thorn in the bloom. Am I betraying him? Samuel confessed to Clara over gelato in the park. Spoons clinking like confessions. She squeezed his arm, maternal in her mercy. David wanted you alive, Sam. Laughing. Loving. Theo understood the shadows. His own losses etched in marble scars. A partner lost to AIDS in the 90s. Art as elegy. Their first kiss happened on a fire escape. City lights winking approval. Tasting of possibility and not replacement. Fall painted the city in fire, and the youth center broke ground. A gleaming glass haven in Williamsburg, sunflowers etched into the facade. At the cornerstone laying, Elias spoke, voice steady, for my son, who taught me love's the truest architecture. Samuel followed, tears blurring the crowd, unveiling a plaque, David Harper, builder of hidden homes. Theo stood beside him, hand warm on his back, a quiet anchor. Yet climax crested not in court or copper, but in quiet unraveling. November circled back, anniversary of the funeral, Rain lashing windows as Samuel hosted a memorial at the center. Queer elders sharing stories. Youth sketching futures. Elias arrived late, coat dripping, clutching a faded photo. Young David, arms slung over Samuel's shoulder at a long-ago Coney Island, candid and caught. Found this in his desk, he said, pressing it into Samuel's palm. You were family then. Always. The room hushed as Elias addressed the gathering, words tumbling raw. I was the villain in his story, pushing prayers where love should have been. But David. He forgave me before I could ask. Applause rippled, healing, and Samuel pulled him into the circle, where hands linked across generations, a chain unbroken. That night, alone with Theo in the brownstone, Samuel lit candles, the photo propped on the mantel. To 12 years, he toasted, glasses chiming. Theo drew him close, lips soft, and to 12 more, whatever shape they take. They made love slow, reverent, David's ghost not haunting but blessing, a warmth in the sheets, not a chill. Winter whispered in, snow dusting the garden like powdered sugar on wounds. Samuel's designs went viral, a series for a marriage equality nonprofit. Intertwined vines symbolizing secret gardens gone wild. Elias commissioned one for the estate. Roots entwined, hung over the mantel where sermons once scowled. Clara's wedding business boomed. Her own nuptials to a gallery curator blending families in a ceremony under sunflowers. Samuel walking her down the aisle with a wink. David's got the aisle from heaven covered, but humanism's heart beats in the imperfect. Elias's relapses into gruff silences. Theo's patience tested by Samuel's midnight vigils at the grave, where he'd leave a single rose and whisper updates. The center's thriving. Babe. We did good. Betrayal's echo faded, not erased. A scar that ached in storms, reminder of love's cost. As cherry blossoms budded in 2027, Samuel stood on the Brooklyn Bridge at dawn, wind whipping his coat. Theo's gift, a new sketchbook, tucked under arm. The city sprawled, resilient and raw, and he thought of David, not lost, but layered into every bloom, every blueprint. Love, he'd learned, wasn't a straight line from hook to happy. It zigzagged through thorns, betrayals, burials, emerging human, humbled, whole. The bridge's cables hummed a low symphony against the April breeze, New York awakening in strokes of gold and grit below. As Samuel leaned on the railing, sketchbook opened to a fresh page where lines began to trace a face. David's, eternal in memory's ink. Theo waited at the span's end, coffee steaming in to-go cups. His silhouette a promise of mornings yet to unfold. But Samuel lingered, needing this ritual. The coordinates where vows were whispered, now a compass for the man he'd become. 2 years since the rain-soaked funeral, and the world had tilted toward light, not blinding, but steady, the kind that warms without burning. Their life now was a tapestry woven from remnants and renewals. The brownstone pulsed with creativity. Samuel's studio in the attic, overlooking a garden where sunflowers nodded to David's ghost. Theo's sculptures crowding the garage, abstract forms of lovers locked in eternal embrace. Mornings started with espresso and eggs. Theo's baritone humming show tunes as he sculpted clay. Samuel sketching beside him, their feet tangling under the table like roots seeking soil. You're glowing? Theo would tease, nipping Samuel's earlobe, and Samuel would laugh. Truly, deeply, because after the deluge, joy felt like theft, delicious and deserved. Clara's family expanded. A niece named Dahlia after David's middle name, her christening a blend of Episcopal grace and queer flair, rainbow cake under stained glass. Samuel stood godfather, Elias beaming gruffly from the pew, his Parkinson's diagnosis a quiet thief but no match for the fire he'd kindled late. "Teach her thorns and blooms," Elias instructed, pressing a seed packet into Samuel's palm post-ceremony. "Like her uncle did, uncle." The word sealed it, family reforged in the kiln of loss. The youth center, David's legacy house, thrived as a beacon, walls echoing with workshops and whispers, art therapy for runaways, coding classes for trans kids, pride nights where elders like Rosa spun tales of Stonewall's fury. Samuel curated the floral installations, rotating exhibits of secret blooms, arrangements symbolizing hidden loves, thorns displayed not as dangers but defenses. Funding flowed, Elias's check the cornerstone, but volunteers were the soul. Theo molding clay hearts with tiny hands, Clara officiating mock weddings for practice runs. Yet drama lingered in the margins, life's unscripted sequel. Summer 2027 brought a curveball, a documentary crew from PBS, tipped by Clara's curator wife, sniffing the Harper scandal for a feature on queer legacies in elite families. Intimate portrait. The director pitched over mimosas at the shop, camera rolling sly. Samuel balked, old instincts flaring, protect the garden at all costs, but Theo squeezed his hand under the table. "Your story, our story. Let it bloom." Elias, surprisingly, greenlit it, sitting for interviews in the study, voice quavering but true. "I was the betrayer. Thought tradition trumped truth. David showed me otherwise through Samuel, filming unearthed ghosts. Footage of the funeral notes flutter, reconstructed with actors. Marla reprising vows in full drag, sequins catching light like stars. Samuel's on-camera confessions hit hardest. Raw footage of him at the grave, rain mixing with tears. "He was my husband. Secret, yeah, but sacred. We built a world in the cracks. And it held." The doc aired that fall. Thorns of the heart, ratings soaring, sparking op-eds on hidden histories. Backlash nipped, trolls decrying agenda, Elias fielding boardroom grumbles, but humanity prevailed. Letters flooding the center, stories of secret loves mirroring theirs, invitations to screenings where strangers hugged Samuel like kin. Romance deepened in the afterglow. Theo proposing on that same fire escape. Ring a twisted vine of gold and sapphire. "Not replacing," he clarified, "I's earnest, but rooting beside." Samuel said yes under a harvest moon, their wedding a mosaic. City Hall redux with Marla officiating. Then a reception in the Legacy House garden. Sunflowers arching like applause. Elias walked Samuel down the aisle of petals. Voice thick. David smiling up there. "Kid." Rosa danced with Theo to salsa beats. Clara's kids scattering confetti like blessings. But the humanistic core pulsed in the quiet fractures, Elias's decline accelerating. Hospital beds becoming familiar foes. Samuel visited weekly, reading blueprints aloud as the old man drifted. "This one's for a library. Dad, stories for everyone." Elias would squeeze his hand, murmuring, "Good man. Like my boys." His passing came gentle in spring 2028. Surrounded by Clara's brood and Samuel's steady presence, will leaving the construction firm to those who build with heart. At the funeral, Episcopal, but with sunflowers framing the altar, Samuel eulogized Elias Harper, architect of empires, and late, of empathy. He learned love's blueprint bends. Grief cycled anew, but Samuel navigated with Theo's anchor, Their home a haven of hybrid rituals. Thanksgiving tamales fused with Connecticut clam chowder. Pride floats designed in tandem. Samuel's career crested. A solo exhibit at MoMA. Gardens of the Neighborhood. Canvases exploding with color and confession. Critics hailing an American Odyssey of the heart. Sales funded scholarships at the center, ensuring David's vision outlived them all. One autumn eve, as leaves carpeted the brownstone stoop, their stoop, now, Samuel and Theo sat with wine, the city sighing around them. Package arrived. Clara's script on the label. David's journal, fully transcribed, pages dog-eared with love. Samuel read aloud, voice weaving through dusk. Samuel, my sunflower, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But we're not. Keep turning toward the light. For us. Tears fell, but laughter followed. Theo's head on his shoulder. He sounds like a hell of a guy. He was. And in that moment, under stars pricking the skyline, Samuel felt the arc complete. Not tragic, not flawless, but profoundly human. A story of betrayal mended, secrets sown as seeds, love enduring like the bridge beneath them, strong, spanning chasms, carrying souls across. Years folded forward, children in time, adopted, a boy with Theo's curls and David's imagined grin, a girl with Rose's fire, running the garden, petals in hair. Samuel grayed gracefully, sketches turning to memoirs, legacy house expanding to sister sites nationwide. Holidays blended, ghosts guests of honor, David's laugh in the wind, Elias's gruff toast in the clink of glasses. 60. Samuel stood again on the bridge, arthritic hand in Theo's steady one, the city a palimpsest of their lives. Worth the thorns? Theo asked, breath fogging the rail. Samuel smiled, tracing the coordinates etched in his palm. Every damn one. Because the blooms, they're eternal, and so they were in the stories told, the gardens grown, the loves that bloomed defiant in America's vast, varied soil. A gay odyssey, dramatic in its depths, emotional in its swells, romantic in its reaches, humanistic to its core, proof that even in secrets and storms, the heart finds its way home.